The front rotors on my 2010 Mazda CX-7 have done about 80,000 miles. Some very uneven wear, so I'll be replacing the rotors and the pads. We've got some very high lips inside and outside. The pads actually conform to them. This is a 2010 Mazda CX-7. I'm replacing the front rotors and pads using 2 jacks and a jack stand. Safety. The back wheel's chocked as well. I'm going to take the brake caliper housing out using 17 millimeters and hang it from a bungee cord. Yes, I had to use a hammer to get these started. Wasn't too bad. Sometimes they're factory set to way harder than your normal person can do. Okay, they come out pretty easily after that. Set them aside, watch out for the grease on them. Yeah, the second one down near the bottom. These are the 17 millimeters for the caliper housing, not the caliper frame. I'm going to have to take that separately. A couple of 19 millimeters. They can be stuck even worse. We'll see what happens. Maybe a little PB blaster, penetrating oil. I'm going to use a bungee cord hooked up into the springs. Hold on to that, keep the brake line straight. You can see one of the pistons in here. There are 2 on this model. We'll be able to push them back with a clamp a little bit later on when we need to. Okay, now we have to get the brake caliper housing, the framework piece out. This is actually holding the pads in, which I'm just going to pry out with a screwdriver. I've got 2 bolts for this. Here's one, and there's one down at the bottom. They're 19 millimeters. Get right to those. A piece of pipe added to the socket wrench can give you more leverage. Just watch out for the ratcheting mechanism in your socket wrench. While I'm letting that penetrating oil seep in, I can get the old pads out. They're going to come out okay. Top, bottom. Back works the same way. Little leverage. And it'll pop out top and bottom. Okay. Go. So we got the top one out pretty well. Took a little bit of hammering. Got it out there. Other one's a little bit stuck. So I'm going to try using a small crowbar to get the top part pulled away a little bit. Get it moving. Get the bottom part moving a little bit more. And watch which way I go so I'm not actually tightening it up further. But to wiggle it back and forth, loosen up that nut on the bottom. So I'm working on prying it out with the crowbar and then tapping it back in with a hammer just to get it moving, because that bottom one's pretty stuck on me there. So this bottom one is finally coming loose. Breaker bar, a little ingenuity, a little patience, let the PB blaster penetrating oil get into that back bolt. Also use your head. Breaker bars don't always fit under here, but sometimes they do. Ratcheting socket wrenches can be broken by all the stuck bolts. 19 millimeter that I was using. You can also use a 3/4. Eventually that's what came out for me with a little bit of hammering. Okay, we'll get that bolt out. I'll have that framework out of the way and work on taking the rotor out. Now that the brake caliper system is completely dismantled, and get to work on removing the rotor from the wheel. There are 2 screws that hold the rotor to the wheel. I have a large Phillips head screwdriver, but in case they're too stuck for that, I have some black oxide drill bits to drill them out. I won't need them when I put it back on. The lug nuts hold the rotor to the wheel just fine. I'm not surprised that the penetrating oil and the screwdriver would not loosen these, so going to work on drilling them out, removing enough metal for the rotor to be able to come off. Of course, drilling, goggles, safety, protect your eyes. That was a little bit less than 10 minutes of drilling for one of them. Just want to make sure the metal filings are off of these threads when I go to put the lugs back on. Clean that up some. Alright, we'll take care of the other one and see how stuck the rotor is. Now that both screws are drilled out, this rotor should just pop right off. See if we give it a little help here. There we go, it's moving. Better than some. Let's take that off and go find the new one. Here we go. Here's the problem I had with the rotor in the first place. The inside wore unevenly. There's a big lip around the outer and inner edges. The brake pads had conformed to it. Good point to remind everybody, do not breathe brake dust. Get some brake cleaner, wear a mask, keep yourself safe. So here's the problem I had with these rotors. The inside with its raised lips and lowered valley in the middle, very unusual wear pattern, as opposed to what the new one would look like. Okay, you can see the drilled out screws through the holes in the new rotor. Just put them in the same place. Nothing in the way, no problem. With the pad holding frame back in place, you're back to a regular pad replacement job. Get the pads back into the slots there in the frame, and then we'll get the caliper put back in place. Alright, here you can see the dual pistons that we have in the caliper. I know on some Mazdas you have to use a tool, rotate them to get them to seat back in, but these will go back in with pressure. I like a trick I saw in another YouTube video using an old brake pad, covering the pistons and a C-clamp to pull them back. There we go, we just tighten it up and pull the pistons back into the caliper. Okay, that looks beautiful. And don't leave that hanging in there. Well, there you have it. It took a few hours working with the bolts, getting the screws out, but now the brakes feel brand new and they work very well. I hope this has been helpful.